The day he sold his house didn't feel like freedom. It felt like failure. The papers were signed, the keys handed over. He walked out the front door one last time and didn't look back. Not because he didn't want to, but because if he did, he might never leave. That house wasn't just walls and windows. It was every version of him that had tried and failed. Every night he'd sat staring at the ceiling, wondering when life would finally begin. His name was Eli Ward, 32. Once a promising student. Now a man with no job, no savings, and no plan, except one word echoing in his head: enough. Enough pretending to be okay. Enough waiting for luck to show up. Enough living someone else's version of success. He'd spent years doing what everyone said he should do. A safe job in a small office. Decent paycheck. A quiet, predictable life. But every morning felt like the same copy of a day he didn't want. Coffee. Commute. Emails. Fake smiles. He'd sit through meetings about growth, while feeling like he was shrinking. And at night, he'd stare at his reflection in the window, the man who had dreams once. The man who promised himself he'd build something real. Somewhere along the way he lost that man. It all changed one night when the company announced layoffs. Half the staff gone. No warning. Eli wasn't fired. But his best friend, Marcus, the one who'd been there since college, was. They stood in the parking lot in silence. Marcus laughed bitterly and said, "Guess loyalty doesn't pay anymore." Then he looked at Eli. "Don't let this place kill you like it killed me." That sentence stuck. Don't let this place kill you. 2 weeks later Eli quit. No backup plan. Just a decision, raw, terrifying, and final. He sold his car first. Then his TV. Then, when the bills started piling up, his furniture. Each sale was like cutting off a piece of safety. But safety, he realized, was the cage that kept him small. When he finally put the for sale sign on his front lawn, his neighbors thought he was losing his mind. Maybe he was. But sometimes, losing your mind is the only way to find your soul again. He moved into a small rented room above a coffee shop downtown. No kitchen, no privacy, just a bed, a desk, and a window with a view of the city lights. It wasn't much. But for the first time in years he didn't feel trapped. He felt alive. Eli always had one idea, a wild one, buried deep in his notebooks. A platform for dreamers. A space where people could pitch their ideas and find small investors, not billionaires. Where ordinary people could build something extraordinary together. He called it Seed. He'd written about it for years but never started. He was always waiting for the right time. Now, with nothing left to lose, the time was now. The first few months were brutal. He'd wake up before sunrise and spend the entire day learning how to code, how to market, how to design. Half the time his laptop would freeze. The other half, his brain would. He burned through his savings fast. He lived on black coffee and peanut butter sandwiches. There were nights he'd stare at the ceiling of his tiny room, whispering, what if they were right? What if he really was crazy? But every time that thought crept in, he'd remember what Marcus said. Don't let this place kill you. And that voice would push him forward again. 6 months later he launched the first version of Seed. It was rough, glitchy, and barely worked. But it was his. At first nothing happened. No users. No sign-ups. Just silence. He felt the panic rise. He'd sold his home for this and no one cared. But then one morning he woke up to an email. A message from a single user. Hey, I found your platform by accident. I posted my idea, a community garden project, and people actually funded it. I just wanted to say thank you. This changed my life. Eli reread that message 10 times. His hands shook. His eyes burned. Because in that one sentence he realized he'd done it. Maybe not for millions, but for one person. And that was enough to start a fire that would never go out. He began updating Seed daily. Fixing bugs. Responding to every email. He poured his entire soul into the code. Soon, a journalist found the story, Man Sells His House to Fund Platform for Dreamers. The article went viral overnight. Within a week, Seed had 10,000 new users. Within a month, investors started calling. Eli didn't celebrate. He just sat in front of his laptop, watching the numbers rise, whispering, "This is what I sold my house for." And for the first time, that empty space inside him felt full. But success, like always, comes with a cost. The more Seed grew, the more people wanted a piece of it. Investors, partners, strangers with contracts. Everyone wanted to help or control. And one night, Eli got an email from a major tech firm offering to buy the entire company for $2 million. He stared at the number on the screen. $2 million. The amount that could buy back his old house. His safety. His past. He hovered over the reply button. But then he looked at the photo he'd taped to his wall, the for sale sign in front of his old house. And he smiled. Because he finally understood. He hadn't sold his home to make money. He'd sold it to become free. When success finally came, it didn't look like fireworks. It looked like exhaustion. Eli was working 18 hours a day. His inbox was chaos. Investors, journalists, strangers with ideas. He'd built something real, something powerful. But he was starting to feel like it was slipping away from him. The project that began as freedom was now becoming a machine. Meetings. Numbers. Deadlines. He wasn't creating anymore, he was managing. And every night, when the noise stopped, he'd ask himself the same question. Is this still mine? Then came the email. Subject, acquisition proposal, $2 million. Eli almost laughed. It was from Apex Technologies, a giant firm that owned half the internet. He'd read about them 1,000 times. Now they wanted him. The message was polite, almost cold. We love what you've built. We believe Seed has incredible potential. We'd like to acquire it, and have you lead our innovation division. $2 million. Health insurance. A salary that would make his old boss look broke. For a second he just stared at the screen. This was it. The dream every entrepreneur fantasizes about. He could buy back his old house. He could finally sleep without worrying about rent. He could prove everyone wrong. But something inside him whispered. At what cost? He met with them anyway. Glass towers. Suits. Perfect smiles. They spoke his name like a brand. Eli, you're the next big thing, one of them said. You're exactly the kind of mind we want on our team. On the surface it was flattering. But underneath something felt off. They didn't talk about Seed's mission. They didn't mention the dreamers who'd found hope through it. All they cared about was the data. The user base. The potential to monetize. It wasn't about helping people anymore. It was about owning them. Eli nodded through the meeting, hiding the storm behind his calm expression. When it ended, one of the executives smiled and said, Take your time. But don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't last. That night, Eli sat alone in his tiny apartment. The offer email glowed on his laptop screen like a spotlight in the dark. He could accept. No more struggle. No more uncertainty. Just comfort. But when he closed his eyes, he saw flashes. The kid who sent that first message saying, You changed my life. Marcus in the parking lot saying, Don't let this place kill you. His old house, empty and echoing the for sale sign in front. He realized something brutal. He hadn't sold that house to get rich. He sold it to escape the cage. And now, someone was trying to build him a prettier one. The next morning, Eli walked into the office and found his small team already buzzing with excitement. They'd heard about the offer. They were ecstatic. Dude, $2 million. We could finally get real funding, real salaries, real everything. We could scale up. Global reach. He smiled weakly. They didn't see the trap, the golden one. He didn't blame them. They'd worked hard too. They deserved a reward. But he knew, if he sold Seed, it wouldn't be the same anymore. The dream would belong to someone else. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, his phone buzzed. It was Marcus. He hadn't heard from him in almost a year. They met that evening at a small diner near the old neighborhood. Marcus looked older, tired, but his eyes were still sharp. He listened as Eli told him everything, the offer, the doubts, the pressure. When Eli finished, Marcus leaned back and said, You know what this sounds like? Eli frowned. What? It sounds like they're offering you the same thing you ran away from. Just with better lighting. Eli chuckled, then fell silent. Marcus was right. You didn't sell your house to make money, Eli. You sold it to make meaning. Don't forget that. That night Eli couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, the city lights flickering through the blinds. His laptop screen glowed, 2 folders opened side by side. One was the contract from Apex. The other was a draft of his new idea, Seed 2.0. A version of the platform that would stay free forever. Owned by no one, controlled by the people who used it. He stared between them. 2 paths. One safe. One terrifying. And then, without hesitating, he dragged the Apex folder to the trash. Click delete. A notification popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently delete this file? He smiled. I'm sure. Click. The next morning he sent one email. Thank you for your offer. But Seed isn't for sale. It was built for dreamers, not corporations. Then he closed his laptop, stepped outside, and took the deepest breath of his life. The air felt different, lighter. He had no investors, no backup plan, no guarantees. But he had one thing the suits at Apex could never buy: clarity. Months later, Seed exploded in popularity. Word spread about the founder who turned down millions to keep his dream pure. People loved the story. They trusted the mission. And that trust built something stronger than money, a movement. Eli didn't become the richest man in the room, but he became the one who could still sleep at night. And that was worth more than every zero on a paycheck. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no to the life everyone else would kill for, and yes to the one that lets you breathe. Because some dreams aren't meant to be sold. They're meant to be lived. The world didn't explode overnight, but it shifted. After Eli turned down the $2 million offer, people thought he was insane. Some called him arrogant. Others said he'd thrown his life away. A few even messaged him personally. "You'll regret this, man." Nobody says no to Apex and wins. Maybe they were right. Because for the first few months it was brutal. Investors ghosted him. Banks refused loans. Even his own team began to question his decisions. But Eli didn't break. He just kept building, quietly, obsessively, relentlessly. He rebranded Seed into something more powerful. Not just a platform, a community. He added one new rule to its core. No ads. No tracking. No hidden agendas. Only stories worth sharing. People didn't believe it at first. In a world where every click was sold, a place that didn't want your data sounded like a joke. But word spread. Users started joining, one, then hundreds, then thousands. Creators loved it. Dreamers lived in it. Because for once they felt seen. A year later, Seed hit 1 million users. 1 million. Eli watched the counter climb late one night. The screen was glowing in the dark. Same apartment, same cracked window, same cheap coffee. He smiled. It wasn't about the number. It was about what it meant. 1 million people believed in the same idea that once only lived inside a basement dream. That night, he whispered to himself, "See? You don't need to sell it to grow it." Then came the news article that changed everything. The man who said no to millions and built something priceless. The story went viral. Podcasts called him. Journalists wanted interviews. Students quoted him in speeches. He wasn't chasing fame, but now fame was chasing him. And with it came the people who once laughed. The same old friends who said, "Get a real job," were now in his DMs saying, "Bro, proud of you. I always knew you'd make it." He didn't reply. Not out of bitterness, but peace. He'd learned the truth long ago. People respect results, not the road you took to get there. Months later, Seed expanded into schools. Teachers used it to help kids share their dreams, their projects, their stories. A journalist asked him once, "Why not sell now? You could retire." Eli laughed. "Because the dream's still growing. And I don't retire from purpose." That quote spread faster than any ad campaign could. It became a motto. Printed on posters, shared on feeds, tattooed on wrists. But it wasn't all easy. With growth came pressure. Hackers attacked. Competitors copied his code. Fake versions of Seed started popping up everywhere. He was tired again, like in the old days. Sleepless nights. Endless updates. Crashes. One night, after a server failure wiped 2 days of data, he sat alone on the floor, staring at his monitor, the same way he used to stare at rejection emails years ago. Felt like a loop. Back to zero. For a second he almost broke. Almost hit shut down. But then he noticed something on the screen. A message from a user. "I'm from India. I found Seed last year when I was lost. I started writing here every day. Now my stories are being published." You didn't just build a website, Eli. You built hope. He read it twice, then 3 times. And that's when he realized the dream was no longer his. It belonged to everyone who believed. A few months later, Seed hosted its first live event. Thousands showed up. A warehouse turned into a digital festival. Lights, art, music, creators from all over the world. No sponsors. No corporations. Just people. When Eli stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted. They weren't cheering for him. They were cheering for themselves, for what they'd built together. He stood there for a moment, silent, overwhelmed. Then he said, "A few years ago, I sold my home because I believed in a dream. Everyone thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But if this is what crazy looks like, I never want to be normal again." The crowd went wild. People cried. Some hugged strangers. Cameras flashed. That moment wasn't about money or fame. It was about the proof that you can start with nothing and still build something the world can't ignore. After the event, Eli went back home, to the same neighborhood where it all started. He passed by the old house he once sold. It looked smaller now. Not physically, but compared to everything he'd built since. He didn't regret selling it anymore. Because if he hadn't let go of that roof, he'd have never found his sky. He smiled and whispered, "You were right, Mom. One day things will be different." And for the first time in years, he felt complete. Months later, a letter arrived in the seed office. No name. Just one sentence. "Thank you for reminding me that dreams are still worth chasing." Eli pinned it on the wall. Right next to his first rejection email, the one that said, "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." Because that's the thing about rejection. It only hurts until you realize it was just redirection. So if you ever feel lost, if you ever feel like you're giving up too much for a dream nobody else believes in, remember his story. He sold his home, his safety, his comfort. But in return he bought something priceless: freedom. And sometimes that's the only deal worth making.